crowd. That's good. I'm sorry we didn't set up more space. We're very, very lucky to have Loretta Downs going to speak to us today. And the name of her talk is The New Age of Death and Dying, From Ignorance to Bliss. And Loretta has a master's degree in gerontology, and she's past president of the Chicago End of Life Care Coalition. She's a certified senior advisor, advanced care planning facilitator. Okay, Loretta.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard, very much. Well, wow, this is pretty gratifying. Thank you very much. I mean, not afraid to come out and hear about talking about death and dying, huh? I'm pretty impressed. Thank you. How many of you have heard me speak here in Lake Chapala before? Oh, and you came again. Thank you. Well, you know, this is like we have two taboos, sex and death, but we're talking about sex a lot now, and we're just starting to talk about death. You know, I've had actually good fortune. Death has kind of always been part of my life. I grew up, I had older parents. My parents were the oldest parents in my high school. I guess I was one of, you know, no one ever told me I was a mistake, but I didn't. I wasn't planned, let's put it that way. When I was 10, we went to visit my Uncle Louis and Aunt Andrea, who had retired to Arkansas, which then was before you retired to Ajijic. And he took us on a tour of town, and he said, this is the grocery store we go to, and this is the dry cleaners we go to, and this is where we're going to be waked, and this is the cemetery we're going to be buried in. So at a very early age, I had, you know, death was implanted in me as a natural part of life. And we're not doing that for our kids today, by the way. We need to be doing that. And so I've always loved old people. One reason I'm real comfortable here, I'm among my own, because now I'm officially old. I'm wearing Kleenex in my sleeves. I cannot. I'm cold all the time. But in that night, I worked in the Chicago Merchandise Mart for my last career, my previous career. And in the 1980s, a lot of the people I loved fell victim to AIDS. It was a creative industry with a lot of gay men in it. And I was not afraid. I was hanging out with them and taking them to doctor's appointments and going to great parties. I went shopping. Some of my friends said, well, if I'm dying, I'm going shopping. Let's run up the Visa card. And it was a really interesting experience. It taught me so much about living, being with dying. And I spent 6 years on one of the legendary AIDS units in the country. It was a model for other hospitals to do. And you know, I saw so many different experiences. I saw how people who didn't want to die, which is understandable. I'm talking about young people who were mostly at the beginning of their lives. You know, how they fought it, and they fought dying, and they suffered terribly. They had more physical and emotional pain. Families were in their rooms having arguments. Their doors were closed a lot, and I would flow in and out of these rooms and just witness all this. And then there were, you know, I would hold mothers crying in the kitchen. That was part of my duties, or certainly it was what I wanted to do. And then there were other patients who were having these incredible experiences. They had people bringing them, you know, decorating their rooms for whatever the holiday was, or they'd make up a holiday, and they'd bring things from home. And I walked in once and somebody was in bed with a patient, and I left. They said, oh no, come on in, we're reading People magazine or something. You know, they were living their lives all the way to the end, and those people tended to get into hospice care. So after they closed the unit, thankfully, in that was 95 to 2001. Then I became a hospice volunteer. So, and I continued to do that. And then my mother went into long-term care just as I retired in 1999. And I've been hanging out in nursing homes ever since. So I want to share what I've learned, because I'm not a healthcare provider. I don't work in healthcare, but I walk in it. And I have a very good eye for witnessing, and a very good ear for listening. And I read a lot. So I'm out talking. My mission in life is to create opportunities like this one to talk about dying and death in positive terms. I believe if we all have to do it, It cannot be a bad thing. I mean, right? I know I'm going to die, don't know when. I have 3 questions for you, and I want you to raise your hands and I want you to look around, okay? The first answer, you have 3 choices, which I will give you. The question is, where do you want to die? 3 questions. I'll read the answers and then I'm going to repeat them so you can raise your hand. You have a choice of dying at home, in the hospital, or in a nursing home. How many of you want to die in a nursing home? Ooh, not one. Not even a good nursing home? Where they have cocktail hours? Some do. Okay, how many of you want to die in a hospital?
Sure.
Okay, that's fair, not too many. How many of you want to die at home? Okay, well, 70% of us, although in this case it's like 98% of us, say we want to die at home, and 70% of us are dying in hospitals and nursing homes. This is why you and I have got to be the voice to change the way we die. I don't want to scare you, but we're next. And we've all watched people going through this. And we've seen Ira Byock, who's one of the preeminent hospice palliative care doctors in the United States, and one of the pioneers. He's been doing this for 30 years. He wrote a New York Times opinion a couple of years ago, and the title was, "Dying Doesn't Have to Be This Brutal." Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about handouts. I've passed out, we had 40 of these LCS end of life, prepared for death at Lakeside. I encourage each and every one of you to complete this. Go into the office and ask them for the end of life documents. This is just the information booklet. You know, we're so lucky to have LCS. This is the document, they put it on record. Should you demise here, someone will call LCS, and this has all the information they need to process, to connect people, that kind of thing. There is, if you've already done it, they offer an update, nice little update. This is mine, I'm not giving it to anybody. And also I had 38 copies of this handout. If you want, it's books that I'm recommending you read and some websites to go to. If you didn't get it and would like it, email me and I'll send it to you. And if you Google Loretta Downs, my website comes up and you can contact me through my website. And I'm happy to answer questions too. I'm going to talk, I'm thinking of maybe about 75 minutes, maybe less. And there's going to be room for conversation and discussion. If you have a burning question, I think maybe it'd be easier for me if you saved it. And somebody else might be able to answer it better than I am. Okay, let's see. So. Okay, I'm going to be talking, when I quote statistics, usually it's the United States, but often those apply very clearly to Canada, and some even to Mexico, and when they don't, I'll try and clarify that. And, okay, so that was the first question. You all want to die at home. I can't answer this for you, but I want you to answer it for you and think about it. Who do you want to be with you when you die? That's a very important question. Who do you want to be there? Now, if I died this week versus 2 years ago, I would have a different answer to that. And maybe when I die, I will have a different answer. But if we're not thinking about these things now when we're healthy, we're going to have a lot of trouble thinking about them when we're really sick and certainly on our deathbeds. We have different work to be doing then. Think about that, okay? And the next question is a yes or no answer, and I'd like to see your hands. How many of you would like to know that you're dying 6 months before you die? Okay. How many of you would like to know not until the week before you die? Okay. How many of you don't ever want to know before you die? Okay. I mean, this is, really, you know, historically there are cultures in which, in fact, even in North America, doctors did not tell the patients when they knew they were dying. They would tell a family member who was too afraid to tell the patient. We're going to change all that. We are. Okay. Now, a little history of the end of life. You know, people used to die quickly, infectious diseases, got eaten by a lion, fell off the road because their eyes were so bad they didn't have glasses, they couldn't see. People died quickly. And then over time, you know, we had the Black Death in Europe that killed about 60% of the population. And then the Christians wrote the Ars Moriendi, beautiful, the art of dying. Right. And it had 6 chapters that told people how to be in service to the person who was dying and to help the person who was dying not caught up in the threats to a good death. It was all about a good death. But then after about 100 years, that fell out of favor. And then a Jesuit named Robert Bellamy wrote The Art of Dying Well. And again, that kind of fell out of favor. And you know, all these things are happening, and we're getting the Industrial Revolution, and we're getting medicine, and we're getting bombing, and then, you know, World War I came, and the people who did come home, it's like, oh, you can't keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris. And families started dispersing. People got on planes and went on the trains, you know, go west, young man. So that shifted how we cared for dying. And then we have the advance of the hospital everywhere in the world, okay? Because there was first, you know, they were all not-for-profit. Hospitals were all not-for-profit. A lot of volunteer help, big wards could serve lots of people. And then the for-profits came in and we started getting smaller rooms and more services and room service and things like that. And we took death out of our houses. You know, it just started to shift as we got more medicalized and it got more convenient. And then World War II happened, and that caused, I think, probably the biggest hit to dying at home, because women went to work. And we are the caregivers. We still are. You go into a hospital and you'll see some, you know, well, it used to be all men doctors, but now 50% of the medical students are female, as 50% of the law students are female. For those of you who have daughters and granddaughters, that's good. So World War II, women went to work. We lost our caregiving force. All this extra money, we had prosperity like we'd never had. And the government was giving money for heart research so people could stop dying of heart disease. And now, how many of you take Lipitor or, you know, one of those beta blockers? Come on, come on, come on. I don't, but I'm not. Okay. Oh, I think it's probably more. No? How many of you take a high blood pressure medication? Yeah, okay. 20 years ago, you would not be walking. You would not be raising your hand today. It's great, little pills. The average 65-year-old takes 5 prescription drugs. And I'm walking around nursing homes and I see those nurses punching out. Some of my friends are taking 15 and 20 pills a day. Some may be vitamins, but there's an awful lot of pharmaceuticals going on, in our frail elderly. So the mobility changed that a lot. And you know, with that, burial practices were changing. Used to be everybody got buried, you bought your funeral plot, family plot, passed it on. You know, I mean, I know people that are right now having dilemmas with what to do with that extra plot that grandma left to you. Don't want to be there. Right now in the United States, 50% of us are cremated. In Canada, it's actually higher, 70%. And in Mexico, I could find no statistics because I suspect they don't keep them. Yeah. But it's a smaller number here. But Mexico City's run out of cemetery space. And that's driving an increase in cremation. And I suspect that will continue throughout this country as it becomes more favorable and it's less expensive, which also is good. And practically, I think for the survivors, you know, the mourners who are left behind, cremation does allow you time to plan a better party. And to, you know, it just does. And for people to travel, it's so expensive to travel on short notice. So there are a lot of reasons that that's happening. And, you know, it's efficient. You can carry people with you. Or what else? We carry people. I'm going to correct that. You can carry the idea of the person with you in a certain way that you can't with a burial. because we always carry the people that we love that have left us with us. They're part of our cellular structure, you know? Even someone you don't know very long who's become a part of your life, when they die and leave, they're not gone. And there's this transition in our expression of grief and our understanding of mourning that's happening too, and that's part of the bliss I'm going to talk about later. So the funeral practices are changing a lot, and all right, now, the contemporary end-of-life experience, like Ira Bonach said, can be really brutal. And it can be lovely. I mean, many people are embracing the end of their lives, and that's what I'm going to talk about next, this little part of the worldwide social movement that's going on. But right now, the contemporary end-of-life experience is one in which, you know, we're not dying at home where we want to, and that's because we're not talking about it. We're not talking about it. It's too uncomfortable. But after you leave today, I think you're going to feel different than you did when you walked in the door. I am. And if I'm right, let me know. I'd like to. Okay. So, the contemporary end-of-life experience, and I tell you the story. If you've read Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, if you haven't, I suggest you do. He tells a story about this servant who ran up to his master, and he said, "Master, I just saw death in the garden. Can I borrow your fastest horse so I can ride to Tehran tonight? And he won't find me." And the master, he loved the servant, said, "Oh yes, of course." And then the servant took off, and the master went into the house and he saw death. He said, "What were you doing threatening my servant?" He said, "Oh, sir, I wasn't threatening him. I was just confused because I'm supposed to meet him in Tehran tonight." We all have a time to die. And it's time we took ownership of it. It is. Because I've seen people who've taken ownership of their deaths and they get the good death. And I'm on an ethics committee at a big, actually the hospital where my AIDS unit was at is the hospital where I was born in. And I sit on the ethics committee, and the cases that come to us, most of them could largely have been avoided if there had been conversations between family members and the patient earlier on. Or people who wind up in nursing homes, and the nursing homes don't have the time or maybe the inclination of the staff to have the conversations and complete the documents. I mean, I'm pretty serious about this. So don't think you're going to get on your horse and get away from it when the time comes. Okay, in the United States, 1/4 of all Medicare money is spent in the last 6 months of life. That's what we need to be looking at for ourselves. You know, the question is, how far do you want to go? And right now, very few, not counting accidental deaths, but few of us, and this is North America, a lot of Europe, very few of us die until a decision has been made to either refuse, limit, or withdraw a medical treatment that's prolonging dying. I mean, that's just the way it is. And most of us, when we get into an ICU, you're not decisional, most of them. You're not decisional. I mean, there are a lot of conditions that reduce a person to a state of incapacity, mental incapacity. So then someone else has to make that decision for you. Okay? An important person, an important relationship. I was a surrogate. Actually, I'm a surrogate for a few people. Most of them are still alive, but I'll be tested. My friend Kenneth, who's lived in a nursing home for 20 years, he was an amazing man. He was probably 6'2", but he had a curved back and big ears and bad teeth, and he was a savant. I'm sure he was harassed as a kid in school. He dropped out of high school. Didactic memory. I could go on. I could talk for an hour about Kenneth. But he had no family, he had no one. He was a very active participant in a church, but the pastor said he couldn't be his power of attorney. Because I brought up, I said, Kenneth, you know, you really need to have somebody speaking for you. And he was very independent. He was like an unpaid staff at the nursing home. And he lived to serve others in the name of Jesus. Amazing. Had no money, gave money to charity. And he was healthy until this summer, in July. And 5 years ago, I said, Kenneth, think about this. And I was giving a workshop at the nursing home, and I said, let's complete 5 wishes. I'm doing a 5 wishes workshop on the 28th at Open Circle. I'm not going to talk about it at length today, but I will there. And it's on the handout, and you can Google 5 wishes. It's a beautiful advanced directive. And it kind of walks you through what's important to you at the end of life in terms of care. And I said, who would you pick? So he thought of his pastor, and then he said, would you do it? And I said, sure. And then this July, I was in Portland on vacation, and I got a call that he had been hospitalized for coughing blood. It was July 3rd, because I came home on the 5th. I came home, saw him in the hospital. He got out, went back, got really sick, went back to the hospital. I went to the ER with him and came back, and I said, Kenneth, I'd like to review your 5 wishes and see if there's anything you want to change. And he had added some music. And we talked about, well, what happened, I think you're going to get better, but we don't know yet. We don't know. We don't know if you're going to get better again this time. And, what would you like for your memorial service? So we started talking about it. He went back to the hospital and came out again on hospice. And it took 19 days from being essentially healthy and walking around to dying. And I had the privilege of being with him every single day, and I was holding his hand when he died. And he had a good death. He had the death he wanted because we talked about it. He was in his own bed in his own room, and his roommate that he was very attached to was in the bed next to him, which was unfortunate because the nursing home had a chrysalis room and got under construction because the privacy would have been better for his roommate. It was really hard. And then we had hospice workers coming in, and those double rooms in nursing homes are just not comfortable or private. So pushing for private rooms for sacred space is what I call it, sacred space for keeping vigil with the dying. I think we have to be doing that more. A lot of nursing homes are making private rooms, so that doesn't, but a lot of them are now, especially with the increase in poor elderly going into nursing care, they're putting 3 and 4 people in a room. So I think we have to be vocal. I want us to be vocal about that. So and I had to make the decision to put him on hospice. If he had become unconscious, I would have had to make some other decisions about, maybe procedures or when to take him back to the nursing home. So being a surrogate decision maker is a very important role, and it's a privilege for someone to pick you to do that. But you need to insist that they talk about what they want. I give these talks at senior centers, and they'll say, how many of you did your advanced directives? And I say, well, where are they? And the spouses, they look at each other, where did you put it, Martha? I said, oh, it's in the safe deposit box. Wrong place. What if you go to the hospital on Saturday or Sunday when the bank's closed? Who did you pick? Oh, I think we picked George. Now we picked Susan. Really? Have you? Well, I guess you haven't talked to them, because if you don't know who you picked, they don't know who you picked. Important process and conversation. Now we have these chronic illnesses and lingering end of lives. And I want to see that changed. I want to see us living. When Cicely Saunders started the first hospice in England in 1967, her philosophy of care is that we will care for you through your life and make the quality of life as good as it possibly can be. Her hospice cart from room to room had scotch whiskey on it and cigarettes. I mean, that's what comforted people in 1967, right? That's what did. I mean, the first hospice in North America, Canada, and the United States was 1974, and it was all volunteer then. And then when Medicare started paying for hospice in both countries, it got that money in it, and now the hospice movement has grown, which I'm going to go into another movement. There's something that is a part of our lives that we really need to be looking at differently. Anything that's happened in the past that you've been involved in, that you wish you'd done something differently, I want you to let it go and just be really present. Cancer used to be a death sentence. And now I can count how many people I know that are still very alive and well post-chemotherapy and radiation. We all can, right? It's fabulous. Not everybody makes it, and sometimes it comes back, and I mean, it's still a very bad disease, but we've managed to treat it, to embrace it, to raise money for it. Dementia is burdening us. We really need to be looking at dementia care and how we feel about living with dementia. Now, my friend Karen Miles here, my best friend, I met Karen the second year I came to Ajijic and got to be really good friends. She taught me, she refreshed my meditation techniques. And Karen was diagnosed with vascular dementia almost 4 years ago. And I describe her approach as she's living conscious dementia, because she's studying it, she's looking at it. She's been a Buddhist practitioner for 30 years. She's been a meditation teacher, and she's noticing it and witnessing it. She knows what she's feeling, what she wants to do. And I think someone said this, and I think it describes living with dementia really well, and it's that you forfeit your life when you get dementia. And it's very true. I think that's true. And I think that I don't have any answers yet, but one thing there is an effort to do is to allow people who are diagnosed with dementia to create advance directives that will say clearly what their limits are and that those will be honored. And we need to be thinking about this and talking about it. What would you do if you got diagnosed with dementia? What do you want the end of your life to look like? What do you want your death to look like? Right now, the overwhelming majority of people who are diagnosed with dementia die in nursing homes. My cousin Andrea, 12 years, dementia. And I was a flower girl at her wedding in 1954. And I was through the whole process. I sat down with her to do a 5 wishes, and that day she couldn't read the menu in the restaurant. She was already that far along, but she knew, I mean, she actually had worked part-time in a nursing home as a social worker and did not do advance directives. I made 5 copies, sent them to each of her 5 children, and gave her husband the original, and I did not make a copy for myself, and at the point in time when they needed that document to find out who she put down, nobody could find it. 6 copies. No one could find it, or they didn't look hard enough. I don't know. Her son finally found one, but everything was already so complicated by then. And then her husband moved into the nursing home, and I got him to do a 5 wishes before he lost his capacity, and he was able to assign a power of attorney for health care and a power of attorney for property to his youngest son. Families, your loved ones don't want you to ever die, ever. Your loved ones will complicate the end of your lives unless you start talking to them. I see this in the ICU all the time, you know, and it's out of love. It's out of love. What am I going to do without you? Or what if I make a mistake and make the wrong decision? That's the big one. I don't know what she wants. She never told me, you know. And then if you've got more than 2, the one from out of town comes in and says, oh, what did you do to Mom or Dad? Or, you know, I mean, because it's just so, and all of the emotions and the guilt and the things that happen at end of life, that's the downside of it. But there is a bliss side, and I'll get there. I promise you. I promise you. Yeah. Yeah, someone said we're prolonging life, not improving life. I think that's, you know, the burdens and the benefits decisions of a medical treatment. Woman who was the director of chaplaincy at Duke University said, dying is a spiritual process with medical implications. We need to make the spiritual process bigger than the medical. And that happened to me, despite the fact my mother died in 2006, and I'd been with a lot of people dying before then. Sat at the bedside of a few people when they died, and somehow I still didn't connect it to me. You know, I was like 50-something or something, and when Mom died. But she died in April. The Thanksgiving after my mother died, I'm sitting at the Thanksgiving table. 12 of my closest family members and one mother-in-law, not mine. And my 22-year-old godson was on his way to Iraq with the Marines the next week. And his 3 brothers were there. And my Aunt Vera, the last of my mother's 5 siblings to still be living. And grace in this household was, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And as he said that, I realized that one of the people at this table will be the first to die, and one will be the last. And then we were also worried about Sean. Aunt Vera was 92, and I became really consumed by this thought for a minute. And in the next moment, I thought, oh my God, I could be either first or last. There's nothing to stop. And I started a panic attack. And then they passed the food around, and I said, okay, I'm going to be back. I'm going to go into the moment. And I filled my plate twice. Yeah, and I just, let it go. But driving home, I thought, oh my God, I'm single. What happens if I were killed, if I were in a car accident today, what was going to happen? My sister would have to deal with all this stuff, and what if I were on life support? She'd have to deal with that. She'd have to deal with all my, I had a lot of stuff, or I had a lot of stuff, I've downsized. But, and I realized I had a responsibility to my loved ones, as well as myself, to not leave too much of a mess. So I set Valentine's Day as a deadline. Ha ha ha, deadline. And I did, So the first thing I did, because I figured it was easier than writing my financial will, I did my 5 wishes, and I called my sister and said, now she's 15 years older than I am, and she's a retired nurse. I said, and we're very close, I said, Dolores, I want you to be my power of attorney. And she said on the phone, Loretta, you're my baby sister. I don't want you to ever die. And I said, then you can't be my power of attorney. I couldn't put her in that position. That's another reason we need to talk. I could have just filled out the form and put it in the drawer, given it to the doctor at the doctor's office, and walked away until she got a phone call one day from the police, So I felt better. And then I wrote a financial will, and I've rewritten both of those things. That was in 2006. I've done them. I'm on my 3rd will and my 5th since actually 2005 wishes. Somebody moves away or dies, you have to change it. And I know a lot of people that are older than I do. In fact, my sister died this year. And she did her 5 wishes because she's been listening to me a long time. And she put her son down. She has 2 children, a son and a daughter. And they're only a little bit older than I am. And she put down her son, which broke her daughter's heart. Broke her heart because she picked him. And actually, picking him was a bad choice. He was just the son and the oldest, and I think that's why she picked it. She didn't think about it. But when she was diagnosed with cancer a year and a half ago, shortly after, probably because I might have said something, I don't know, she changed it and put her daughter as power of attorney for health care. And it relieved her, because she knew her son wouldn't be able to do it. She said, he can't do that. He hasn't been in a hospital for decades, even to visit somebody. And her daughter's a tough cookie, and she could stand up to the doctors. And fortunately, she didn't have to. But that's an important relationship, I think. And and that's, this advanced care planning is part of the social movement that's happening now. Remember when cars didn't have seat belts? Remember when, how many of you used to smoke? That's all? Wow. Okay. That's why you're all here. No, really. We're the Olympians of aging. We are. Whatever we did in our past, where we grew up, the way we took care of ourselves, what we ate, all that stuff, that's why we're here. Because one of the big dangers to people longevity now is lifestyle and environment, right? So clearly, this environment doesn't get much better than this. Yeah, we are the Olympians of aging. I mean, I'm 68, so we're definitely the Olympians of aging. Where was I before I got on that good subject? I get excited about that. All the movement, cigarettes, seatbelts, right? Remember cars didn't have seatbelts? I feel like naked without my seatbelt on. Cigarette, that was it. When they started labeling cigarettes in 1963, almost 60% of the adult population in the United States smoked. It's 19% now. 19. And I think a lot of that I see young people smoking, maybe more. Condoms, right? When AIDS started, in the 80s, condoms were behind the pharmacy department. It was like, ooh, condom, right? Well, I was at the Lollapalooza concert in Chicago. I wasn't at the concert, I was walking along the lakefront, and there were a bunch of planes with, Sony and something, and there were Trojan condoms floating over the sky in Catholic Chicago. I thought, wow, and they're in the grocery store, and they're in the drugs, So this is a social movement, this Me Too Now. That's a social movement that's changing the lives of our young women. It's so important to be doing, and our young men, they're growing because of this. We need this. Marriage equality. These are social movements. And now we are part of the movement, well actually it's not just us, young people are doing to change the way we're dying. Okay, it started with hospice, in the 90s. In 2000, Bill Moyers did a series called On Our Own Terms. Anybody see that? Like a 4-part PBS series. It was fabulous. People weren't taught, hospice, that's where you go to die. Not going to do that. It's significantly improved. Right now, 44% of all deaths in the United States happen in hospice, but we're using hospice as a last resort when it's a last reward. 28% of people are in hospice for less than 1 week, 7 days. And I can tell you a lot of people die the day they're admitted because the families and the doctors wait. Oh no, we don't want, one more treatment? You got one more treatment? I'm waiting for a miracle. It's just, we're not being realistic. And what's happening is we're causing a great deal of suffering, both for the person who's dying and those of us left behind. We've got to transform that. And we can. I know we can. We're doing it. It's getting better. Okay? So we have all this wonderful, hospice now that it's being paid. 60% of hospices are for-profit, and that often means that they keep their staff levels a little bit lower than the not-for-profits. If you have a choice, I would go for a not-for-profit hospice. And that certainly is going to teach people some lessons about how to care for people. I mean, there are articles I'm picking up about this. Another thing that happened was in 1991, we got legal advance directives. That meant a piece of paper where you could designate a person to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. And they give you usually 3 choices because they were considered to be in case of emergency. More people were dying in car accidents than we wanted to think of. Dying of diseases, everyone goes, oh yeah, you die in the hospital of a disease, but car accidents, so they had these emergency documents were part of the reason. And they tell, all right, your choice are if you're in a coma, or if you're not going to recover, if you have serious brain damage, or other condition. 3 choices. I want everything done to keep me alive. If something's been started, I want it stopped, or don't do anything. Those are the basic choices in a legal advance directive. The reason that advance directives got legalized was because of Karen Quinlan and Nancy Cruzan, familiar names, right? Karen Quinlan was 31 when she died. She lived 10 years in a persistent vegetative state. Her parents had to go to the Supreme Court to get her disconnected from a ventilator, and she breathed on her own. So she was on tube feeding for 10 years until she died. That started some awareness. Nancy Cruzan was at a party, and Quinlan was at a party and took tranquilizers and drank alcohol. I'm sure she didn't know that was going to happen to her. Nancy Cruzan was 33 when she died in 1990 after living 8 years post-auto accident in a vegetative state with tube feeding. And her father said, you try your damnedest as long as there is hope. But they went to the Supreme Court and said, there is no hope anymore, we need to get her disconnected. This whole experience, and the attorney who tried that trial wrote a book called Last Rites, R-I-G-H-T-S. This was so traumatic that 6 years later he committed suicide. It was just too traumatic for him. And then Terry Schiavo in 2005, we were all part of that, right? Everybody, there were like 1,000,005 wishes got ordered that year. That increase, really. People said, well, we've got to talk about this. You know, she spent 15 years on feeding tube, dying at 42. And that was a case of love. Her parents loved her, they didn't want to let her go. Her husband loved her and said she would never want to live like this. And then somehow the government got involved. You know, it's been said, if you don't own your life, you don't own anything. To think about that. And autonomy is one of the highest human values, everywhere. I mean, that's what Viktor Frankl wrote about when he was talking about people in the concentration camps. The autonomy they had was to control their attitude. That was the one thing no one could take away from them. And now we have things that prolong our lives. It's not just ventilators and tube feeding, there's dialysis. There are a lot, antibiotics. You can be really, really sick and not take antibiotics, and if you get sepsis, you die, or you can take them and come back and try it again. Yeah, like my mother was in hospice 3 times before she died. She couldn't make up her mind. Well, I was there, we were having a good time. It's like, but it was hard. The second and the third time I signed the paper were actually harder than the first. First time I thought, oh God, Mom, this is going to be great. I'll be your hospice volunteer. I'll move into your room, because she was in the nursing home, and I did. And then a few days later, she perked up and woke up and said, where's my lunch? We just loved her up. It was really good. Actually, the best years of our relationship were the last 3 years of my mother's life in a nursing home. And it was a pretty good one. And it still is. I still visit it. I've been going there for 17 years. Death, knowing she was dying allowed us to transform our relationship from one that was very prickly, and I felt like I was always disappointing her and I wasn't good enough, and she kind of, I don't know, that's what I heard her say, but it was just all kinds of 50-something years of accumulated stories in my head, and one day it was her 90th birthday. She's in a wheelchair, and I said, Mom, what does it feel like to be 90? And she said, didn't even think, it went so fast. I said, well, would you do anything differently? And she looked right at me and she said, I'd be a better mother. And something first of all, I said, oh, she knew. I mean, the admission of guilt, just acceptance causes a whole transformation. And I said, well, and then something, I could feel something in my open. It opened. And I got on my knees in front of her so we could be eye to eye, and I said, Mom, you were the best mother I could have ever had because you taught me what I needed to learn. And from that moment on, we were so good. I used to get in bed with her and stir ice cream into her coffee and share it with her, and we'd tell stories. Actually, I was in bed one day, I said, Mom, what if something happens to you? What do you, and you can't talk to us, and what do you want us to do? And she looked straight ahead, and she said, you girls will know what to do. Just wish we had a little more information. She was 93, and she'd been in hospice 3 times. It was kind of easy to just say, no, we're not going to keep her in the hospital, we'll bring her home. No feeding tube. Yes, okay. We now have National Healthcare Decisions Day in the United States since 2007. And in 1997, the first state in the states, Oregon, created a death with dignity law. And right now there are 4 states in the District of Columbia that have legal aid in dying, and the entire country of Canada legalized it in 2015, along with euthanasia, which they're still working, there's still conflict, debate, ethics things, but it was decided by the Supreme Court of Canada that it is a human right to choose the timing of your death. Interesting. It's happening all over the world. Victoria, New Zealand just legalized it. And right now there are 20 states that have bills in their legislation to legalize aid and dying. Because we want the good death. That's why. Okay, so the bliss.
Excuse me,
Yes.
could we get the fans turned on? Because you really don't
Oh, sure. Fan?
It's one of those.
Top switch,
Boy, I'm really old. I'm
top
not.
switch.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying
It's
something.
too noisy to open the doors.
The purpose, I think life's all about comfort. My standards for quality of life don't have to do so much about things and stuff like they once did, but it's about my level of comfort. I like my lights lower, and I listen to classical music all day. I don't want to listen to voice. I just don't want. That's me. And I drink tea in the morning, and then with a little almond milk in it, and I switch. How many of you drink something hot in the morning? Ooh, how many drink something cold in the morning? Well, that's interesting. Okay, if I had a younger audience, there'd be a lot of soda drinkers out here. Interestingly, but that's those are your quality. That's a quality of life parameter. And if we're not spending as much time on the quality of our death as we do on the quality of our lives, it's going to bite us. Period. How much time do you plan a vacation? How much time did you take to do your end-of-life documents? Got to ask yourself these questions. And I understand putting things off because I'm kind of a born-in procrastinator. But I know what's important to me. I kind of get done faster. So in the bliss, okay. I think one of the things about the bliss part of the end of life is we're doing it older. Isn't that great? So many of us are living to be over 85. And pretty much if you make it to 85, you are likely to make it to 95. There's just, yeah, you are. Ooh, yeah, that's an awful lot of laundry. That's how I look at it. Oh, more dishes, more laundry. Really, I'm 65. That makes me likely to make it to 85. And I'm trying. Have to get back to the pool. Yeah, so we have longevity, and that's part of the bliss now. We get to spend more time with the people we love. We get to do more of the things we've been wanting to do when we couldn't do them. And a lot of us have enough assets to do this, to do what's important to us. We're giving. We're giving back in great numbers. We do enormous volunteer work, all of us retirees. Enormous amounts, and generosity. There are not-for-profits that wouldn't exist if it weren't for retirees donating money and time to them. And look at here at LCS, how important the work is that's being done here, and we're all contributors to that. That's part of the bliss I see in living longer and dying later. And even, the older we get, there's something back here that goes, yeah, I know, I don't have a lot of time left, I don't have the same amount of time. And we do change some of the decisions we make. Coming here was one of those decisions, right? Yeah. So I think that is bliss. Another bit of bliss that we got, I was talking about this advanced care planning. There are numerous websites now, and I've given you a couple here, that teach you how to have the conversation. In fact, one's called The Conversation Project. And how do you talk to your loved ones? How do you talk to your doctors? Medicare certified doctors get paid now to have these conversations. Ask your doctor. Tell them what's important to you. So I want to come in and have an advanced care planning talk. Here in Mexico, I brought my Red Cross bottle. Anybody not know what this is? Okay, the Cruz Roja here gives these out, but I think they're 20 pesos. They're not much. 20 pesos. How much?
50.
50 pesos. What a bargain. This is supposed to go in your refrigerator. In it has a document that's in Spanish and English so the EMTs can read it. Very simple. Basic information. Who's your doctor? Who's your next of kin? Who's got the keys to your house? What medications are you on? Who are the important people to call? Where do you live? And then there's a yes and a no section about what kind of diseases do you have, or did you have? But anyhow, I've got down here, eyeglasses essential. Who would know? right, if I was taken away on him. And I did my Mexican advance directives with a notario that named someone to speak for me, and it wasn't expensive, and that's in the bottle too, just in case somebody comes. I mean, they get me on, I call them and then I pass out and they can't. And then this comes with a magnet.
They said to put your picture in there as well.
Oh,
There's a little place, a little picture.
a little picture so you don't get mistaken like in the nursery. Not a bad idea. Okay. And it comes with a little Red Cross sticker you put on the fridge, so they're trained to look for the sticker on the fridge and open the fridge and get the bottle. They're trained to do that, to Roja, Cruz Roja. Great idea. Relief. I don't have to worry about what if, blah. Okay, so I'm recommending that to everybody. Okay, there is a whole movement to understand do not resuscitate orders and to get them done. New York Times, there was a story about somebody who had it tattooed on his chest. And they showed a picture, big, deep, do not resuscitate me. And the guy had a history, a lot of sickness, broken body. And they got him to an emergency room, and of course the emergency will go, what do we do? He didn't have anyone to speak for him, but the guy's got a DNR, but he didn't have a legal paper. And I know my hospitals, when people come in, they go, who's the person with the papers?
That's right.
First question. And it's the same here. Who's speaking for you? Anyhow, the DNR had to go to the ethics committee. What do we do? Meanwhile, they'd started treatment, but they didn't intubate him, but they gave him drugs, pressors, and the ethics committee decided this man was so serious that he had it permanently put on his body. He means it. Don't resuscitate him. And he died. It's not the best thing to do. A bracelet might be better, but your documents are really important, and don't put them in this, I carry a wallet. The 5 Wishes has a wallet card that you put in your wallet, and I carry that. And if I had a heart condition and I might have a heart attack on the street, I would definitely wear jewelry if I did not want to be resuscitated. Now, on television, about 85% of the people who get resuscitated survive. No. For a frail elderly person, it's about 0, and they open your ribs and hurt you. For someone who's seriously ill, it's maybe 3%. Younger population, unexpected cardiac event, a little bit more survival rate. It's something to think about and be aware of and make a decision at some point. This advanced care planning is really a 3-step process. Do it when you're healthy first. Pick a person, start the conversation, let it lie. Maybe you talk about it over dinner. Because I have friends who don't invite me to dinner anymore. You know who your friends are. I know who my friends are. And then the second time you do it is when you're diagnosed with something scary. Oh, better revisit this. What's important to me now? Who's important to me? Who wants to have this responsibility they may need to take? And then the third time is when you're talking, looks like, well, maybe a year wouldn't be a surprise if I died. And then you do a DNR, and you do a no feeding tube, and you do what you want, and start making some plans. And if you out-survive it, yay, it's done. It's not like you get jinxed. Talking about death won't make you die any more than talking about sex will get you. I was going to say laid. I'm not too old. Okay. So, in the bliss department, we have more control than we've ever had over the end of our lives. We have more options. And I'll tell you a gift, we've got palliative care. Oh my God, palliative care. Hospices are now calling themselves palliative care and hospice because people were so afraid of hospice. Oh, you die in hospice. Yeah, you die well in hospice, usually. So palliative care, and we've got a couple palliative care docs here that are great. Dr. Sam Thielen, Dr. Sam Thielen, and Dr. Garcia, I believe, is he palliative care? Somebody told me that.
He's an internist.
Internist.
Who has a lot of experience with end of life.
Wendy Carroll, hospice advocate and senior advocate and local persona, very importante. Thank you. Yes. Palliative care. You can start palliative care when you're getting chemotherapy. You work it together. It's not an either or anymore. So you can start getting, because it's pain management, and they're specialists. Not everybody needs to, knows how to wield the morphine and the Ativan and the Oxycontin, all those things that people often need when our bodies are shutting down and misbehaving badly. When you've gone behind on just some arthritic pain and you've got some organic stuff going on. You need a specialist for that. Palliative care is a gift, and in Mexico, in 2015, palliative care was determined by the government to be necessary and should be available to all of the Mexican citizens.
It's a right.
So it's a right. Palliative care is a right. Comfort at the end of life, and they're in the process of training more doctors now, so it's like the hospice movement built with people getting trained, and there's a lot of training to do. In the States, we're short about 3,000 palliative care doctors, and right now most of them are in hospitals or working for hospices. But they're available and they're training and more, it's happening. You've got to ask for it, supply and demand. When you demand the stuff, they'll come up with the supply. Palliative care is part of the bliss available to us for end-of-life care. Another option, we have physician aid in dying as a growing availability. Voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Anybody think about that? These two wonderful women. Karen came up to me at Open Circle 3 years ago, said, I have to talk to you. My mother stopped eating and drinking on purpose so she could die. I said, I want to talk to you. Now, their mother took unusually long because she was drinking a 4-ounce glass of wine every afternoon.
And
singing.
Poetry and laughing.
And
her 3 daughters were
daughters,
together.
and the dogs and the daughters came, and everybody, and they had a 34-day vigil. But they had a party, and their mom was in control. She said, this is what I want to do. I'm ready. I've had a really good life. I'm ready. And I'm going to have a good death because it's going to be what I want, and you're going to be part of it, and I'll be kept comfortable. My mom had ultimately a stroke and pretty much slept through the last 8 days of her life, and just got love, and man, Emily Raskin, her husband Mitchell died last October, and she told me her story the other day, how it was really important for him to be buried here at Lakeside with his parents, and they had gone to the States so Mitchell could have some chemotherapy treatments for a very aggressive, late discovered cancer. It was in May when he was diagnosed. So they'd gone to the States to get some superlative treatment. And the one factor that guided all of his end-of-life decisions was about getting back here. And that involved refusing aggressive treatment, recovering from it because it had done so much devastation so he could travel, and having palliative care when he got here. And he was able to die at home, and they were able together to make enough plans so that everything about the end of his life and his after death were as he wanted it. And that, and Emily told me it happened so quickly, and even though they were getting ready, that was just a few months, and there were so many, it's all so new. We don't get to practice losing our loved ones. It happens once. Even if you have, 2 husbands or wives, it's different. It's not. It's even people who work in hospice every day of their lives, when it's their own family members and loved ones, it's different. And it's so important that we're able to communicate these things and share these things. Sharing the journey, you learn life lessons that you couldn't imagine that you would learn at all, and Mitchell got all of his wishes. And the day he died, Emily told me that she just wasn't ready. She wasn't ready, and she wanted to sleep in the room with him. We can do these things. Now, there's a whole new group of professions that are coming. Death midwives. Google death midwives, and you will find websites and Facebook pages of people who are becoming professional guides for dying. Death doulas, just like in birth. In fact, the whole death movement is very much mirroring the birth movement. You know, when I was born, my dad was down the hall smoking cigarettes in 1949, and my mother stayed 2 weeks in the hospital. Today, you go home the day you give birth. And not only is your husband the father, or whoever's the father of the child, or your wife, I mean, you know, this is a whole different world. The kids come into the delivery room. Grandparents. Have any of you been in the delivery room with somebody? Yeah. Okay, I haven't, but yeah. So this birth movement, parents wanted to be a part of it. They wanted it to be a family event. They prepare for it. And now we're doing this with end of life. There's something, death cafes, which Wendy and I are trying to organize, and keep your eye open for notice of a death cafe in town next month. Haven't got it all detailed yet, and you just come and talk about dying. It's not, there's no discussion, it's not about what you want, it's just out loud, hearing each other. Death over dinner. Death over dinner was created as a graduate school program. 20-year-olds. And they have a website, both of them have websites. You can organize your own death cafe or your own death over dinner. And they show you how to do it, give you the instructions, not complicated. Talking about it will make so much difference. Alternative therapies. You know, people are doing Reiki with people dying, and music therapy, and massage therapy, and fragrance therapies, and just so many things that we're doing to create bliss at the end of life for the process. Because there's a lot of work to be done. Dying, you cannot just die, just thinking about it. There's a lot of work to be done. The cannabis. Cannabis is being used in palliative care. I think it's like 26 states have legal medical marijuana. And actually, I have a bad back, thank goodness. And I just applied for medical marijuana in Illinois. I can't believe how hard they make it. You know, it's like I was trying to do something wrong. Really, it was complicated and a little expensive, but when I get home, I should have my card. I know palliative care doctors that are using cannabis very successfully for pain relief, sleep relief, anxiety relief. You know, now that they're edibles, lotions, suppositories. There's a whole range of cannabis products now, and it's a natural herb, crying out loud. Meditation, there's a push for us to learn to meditate, so that when you can't do anything, you can follow your breath. You can follow your breath and calm yourself. You can keep your heart rate peaceful. You can just work with your breath. And it's amazing what it'll do. The scientific studies they've been doing for the last more than a decade now with serious meditators like Zen practitioners, and they brought people in from Asia to study their brains. They find that meditation over not that much time will change your brain in a good way. Strengthens the right parts. Okay? Rituals. Families, people are increasing. They're just creating rituals. I think part of the bliss, and I consider myself to be part of this, and I've certainly witnessed this, what happens organically when you're caring for someone who's dying. I have a friend, actually I've talked to Karen, and we've talked, when it's her time, if we, know, I'm going to put her in a Buddhist shrine, I'm going to decorate her room like that. And I know I want soft music, it's in my 5 wishes. I want classical music, I want those white lilies that a lot of people don't like. I want a room full of them. I love that spicy smell. I want somebody to be touching me and rubbing my hands, rubbing my feet. I like that. That will soothe me. That will really soothe me. What else? I want glasses on in case I really can open my eyes. I want to see who's staring at me. I wrote this down. I want my girlfriends to tweeze my chin hairs because I'm vain about it, and I'm Italian. Chapstick, lipstick. I want lipstick on my lips. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, chocolate ice cream, not vanilla. And socks on my feet. No one knows these things about me. I live alone. I felt that was important for my quality of death, that I had those comforts. What else is happening? The dualism and life. You know, the vigil process is becoming so important, and that's where the death midwives and the death doulas. People are building their own, building their own coffins, having their friends build coffins for them. Home funerals, they bring the coffin in the house and people decorate it while the person is still living. It becomes a life process. It's so beautiful. Home funeral, green burials. Big increase in green burials. People don't want to be embalmed anymore or cremated. I mean, they're both bad for the environment, bottom line. There's grief support like we never had before for those of us left behind. When my sister was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and we pretty much knew, I mean, she woke up one day yellow. She was 82. And we pretty much knew what that meant. It was, you know, it's a very bad diagnosis. Survival rate is awful. And she had a very good internist who recommended an oncologist who specialized and happened to be at her hospital, which wasn't that close to her house. And he offered her light chemo just to see if they could stop it from progressing or expanding. And she was doing really well for about a year, actually. And we got a Thanksgiving like we never had before at my house. First time, I didn't cook, I ordered the food, but it was the first time I ever had Thanksgiving at my house. And the picture we took that day is my favorite picture of my sister and me next to the window wedding. She's holding my hand. Yeah, so knowing she was dying really allowed me to open up. I stopped being crabby when she'd say things that I went, oh, that is so stupid. How could you say that? You're my sister. That's stupid. You know? Or when she'd eat really bad food, and don't you ever read labels? I let go of all that the minute I knew she was dying. I don't know why I didn't let go of it earlier, but this is one of the blessings of knowing about you dying, or someone you love is. You can grow. It really is an amazing opportunity for growth and transformation for everybody. And I'm not in a hurry to die, and I don't know what I'm going to be like when I get there. In fact, two of my primary teachers, Franco Sosesky, who just wrote or published The 5 Invitations, which is on that list, and Joan Halifax, who runs the Zen Center in Santa Fe and wrote Being with Dying and teaches that course. We were at a workshop and they both said, you know, they didn't know, and they felt they were a little uncomfortable because all of the people they've been teaching for so many years have expectations for how they're going to die. They said, we don't know. And it's true. But I do know the more prepared I am, and you are, the more likely I am to have a good death and a death the way I want it. I just know that. So, before we start chatting, death is a reciprocal relationship with our loved ones, with our caregivers, and with our community. And I think we have a very extraordinary, exceptional community here of us that have come. We've left a lot of our support groups. And we've come here, I mean, I know people come here and they fall in love again, or for the first time. You know, a lot of things happen here. We're getting really good health care because we've asked for it. It's happening. We're building a big hospital. We have a wonderful community, and we really, it's time to start figuring out ways to help each other and support each other and share the journey together. And if you're at all interested, send me an email. I'm starting a list. Wendy, Catherine Luria, and I have been talking about this. I know there's some hospice nurses and some people who come here who've lived here. Just, you know, if you're interested in doing something, have no idea where it's going to go yet, but it's certainly worth starting a list, a conversation. Think about the quality of your life and the quality of your death. When you get to make decisions, think about longevity versus quality of life. And, okay. I raise monarch butterflies in the summer. Anybody raise monarch butterflies? Anybody been to Michoacan to see the monarchs? Yeah. Well, I started doing this in 2002 when a friend showed me how to, from eggs I find on milkweed. And I've since planted milkweed in my garden. I used to have to travel around to empty lots in Chicago, but they all got built on pretty fast. And It's an amazing creature, like all butterflies, moths. You know, it starts out as an egg like us, and then it grows into a caterpillar, and it eats and it poops like us, and it goes along until one day the caterpillar stops eating, like everything does before it dies. Plants stop taking in nutrition, animals will stop eating, and humans stop eating before we die, because we're shifting the usage of our energy inward to shut down. And the caterpillar will look for a place to hang, spit some silk out, hook its hind legs into the silk, and turn around and hang in the shape of a J for over a day. Programmed. And then in an instant, the skin behind its head splits, the caterpillar straightens out, and it starts to writhe. And as it does, its skin, its feet, its nose are all curling up to the top of this peg now, and you see the chrysalis revealed. And in the monarch, it's this pale green, looks like a small acorn. And as soon as the skin falls off, I mean, the caterpillar has died to become a chrysalis. And it takes about a few hours for the chrysalis to really solidify, and it gets some little gold spots on it. And that chrysalis will sit looking like nothing's going on for almost 2 weeks, 10 days. But that's where the magic's happening. That's where the miracle is happening. And we all have a chrysalis stage at the end of our lives. It's that quiet stage. It might be a few hours, it might be a few days, when we are processing the transformation of our consciousnesses out of our bodies. And then one morning, it's always when the morning comes and the sun, the chrysalis feels the day, and it splits open. And out emerges a butterfly, got a big fat body and little wrinkled wings, and it takes a few minutes pumping the fluid into its wings. And I'll sit at my kitchen table, because I keep them in big bug boxes, and I'll just watch this. It's like sometimes even breathless. It's pretty amazing. And then it sits still, hanging on to its chrysalis, which is now kind of a cellophane tissue thing. And when it's dry enough, it starts to move its wings. And I'll take the butterfly out, put it on my finger, usually, unless it's been there too long, if I've run an errand. And they take off, up. And I always, what did that feel like? What do you think that first flight feels like? I think that's death. I think the moment of our death is the moment that that butterfly takes off. I don't know where it goes. I have no idea. Not going to spend too much time thinking about it. But it's free, and it's gone, and it's in a new form, as we all will be one day. I like to think about that. I just kind of like think one day. That fills me. All right, 2 more things. When you go home tonight, I'm giving you homework. You don't have to bring it back, though. I want you to go home, and I want you to draw a line on a piece of paper with a notch on both ends. This side's your birth, and this side is your death. This is actually a time management exercise that my friend Sidney Callett teaches for Franklin Covey. When I took the course, I couldn't do what I'm going to ask you to do next. It took me a few weeks. Got this line, right? Birth, death. Make a mark where you are today. And it was like that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It took me a while. I have since done it repeatedly. I walk my talk. Yes, do that. Ponder that. And when you look at that line, everything that's happened from today, from the beginning, you can't change. Let it go. Clean it up. Love it. Love yourself. We all do the best we can at any point in time, especially in a crisis. No one goes into a crisis and says, oh, I'm going to screw this up. We do the best we can with what information we have. So take your past and love it. Just love it, hold it, it happened. And whatever future you have, however long that might be, make it good. And make part of it considering the end of your life and how to make that good. Demand that the doctors talk to you about this. Write your legislators. Tell them you want more options. Sign petitions. They're coming out all the time. Start your planning. Talk. and share the journey with people who are doing it. I'm going to leave you with a quote by Rumi. Life gives us two great gifts, love and death. And mostly they're passed on unopened. Change that. Be the change you want to see. Okay. I'm going to thank you for that, and I'm sure people have questions and comments.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm just speaking for a lot of friends of mine who are circling me now. Yes.
I have a couple of things that when my husband died here, the idea was finally to tell him that it was okay to go. Because so many, he hung on because of us. And I finally had to tell him, you can go, you can go. And the other thing is, of course here, using the services, they cremated him. And I didn't put his ashes on the mantle. So, but I thought about this problem of ashes. And his father died when he was 3, and he always missed that. So I called the cemetery in Boston, could they open his father's grave and put the ashes in with his father? And that's what I did.
Ritual. That is a creative, spiritual process. I would like to, one thing. A lot of people, I hear this, say, I don't care what you do with my ashes. Don't do that to your loved ones. My sister-in-law drove her brother's ashes around their car for 3 years in the trunk. You got to give people some instruction, really. It just complicates life. And hospice people, actually there's a book called Final Gifts, written by 2 hospice nurses, and it talks about nearing death awareness, and very often, as people are dying, they see people who have died before. Yes, yes.
But even though my friend had made all of her directives, she didn't want this. When we ended up in the hospital because she had a stroke, in addition to dying of cancer, it started on this started down this pathway, and it was like, where does it stop? Even though you may have given directives.
Was she talking at this time?
Yes.
Was she able to give directions?
Yes.
If she didn't say, don't do it, I want to go home.
No.
Okay, that's where it stops. It stops when you say stop. On my ethics committee, one day we had a very complicated situation, and one of the doctors says, you know, it's interesting, when the patients don't want to do what we want them to do, we say they're non-decisional. But when they do what we want them to do, we say they're smart. You have to decide what's right for you when the burdens of the treatments are worse than the benefits. And you can say, stop, send me home, call hospice.
They get too delusional in there.
Well, that's what the power of attorney for health care is supposed to do. You really, everybody who goes into a hospital today needs an advocate. You're alone, you're at risk if you're alone in the hospital. Because they're supposed to do, you know, they're treating symptoms and side effects, and that's what they're supposed to do, they're trained to do. And they feel that they're bad doctors if they don't. Although, I just read an article that said hospital errors should be in the top 10 causes of death. Because they're happening all the time. We have got to be our own advocates, and we have to have advocates. That's the only answer. Oh wait, this one. Yes?
Can you tell us how advanced directives differ in Mexico from the United States?
Right now, Mexico pretty much has the notario form, which does specify, it says I don't want any life-saving treatments if they would keep me alive when I would die without them, basically. So it's, you know, no ventilation, no feeding tube. But you need to, it's got to be signed by, it's got to be done and signed by a notario. I can't remember, it wasn't very much money to do it. How much? 950 pesos, so like $50 to do it. Wait, what? I'm sorry, is that on the same?
Go ahead. I'll just
Patricia.
I was going to say, one thing that we did with my mother when she was already dying at home, and we knew she's in the dying hallway, and you have that next event that's scary, I would call the doctor and we would talk about it, but we wouldn't call an ambulance again.
Don't call the ambulance.
Don't call the ambulance if you know they're already
Yeah,
dying.
thank you, Patricia. Anyone who's in hospice care, and I know here hospice isn't happening because so many families are still taking care of their loved ones at home. But don't go to the hospital. That really is the essence of the whole thing. If you want to die at home and you're getting adequate comfort care and you can die at home, the ambulance, they're trained, unless you have a DNR on your refrigerator. They have, and resuscitation only happens after you die. Most of us don't understand that. It's not something that's done casually. You have to stop breathing, your heart has to stop and you're not breathing, then you're resuscitated. Otherwise, there are other treatments, if you have shortness of breath, you get oxygen, because that's pretty uncomfortable. When we're at the end of our lives, our bodies are really, they want to shut down. We're not in good condition. And in that case, if you get a urinary tract infection and you don't get antibiotics, you'll just get sepsis and die. You get pneumonia. I mean, I see in nursing homes, people with dementia who've been living in the nursing home for years being spoon-fed and they get pneumonia and the family says, oh, give her antibiotics. Why? That used to be called the old woman's friend. I mean, pneumonia is a relatively smooth dying, I mean, we just have to be more aware, yes.
I've been a caregiver in Seattle for the last 5 years, so any of you that are going back to the United States know this. If you stop breathing and somebody calls 911, in Seattle it's the fire department, they come in first. The first person will look for about 20 seconds for your DNR while the other person gets ready to resuscitate you. Okay, so they may not resuscitate you, they may take you to the hospital. That DNR doesn't oblige the people in the ER to not resuscitate you. Wow. So if the ambulance takes you to the hospital, they can still resuscitate you unless somebody's there with the paperwork. This really surprised me.
Is that a Catholic hospital?
No. It is now, but it wasn't. But they may still resuscitate you, to know that.
I'm going to clear that up because there have been lawsuits about that. One, that the person who was not, I think very often the lack of paperwork or the late arrival of paperwork is a bigger problem. Another question? Story question? No? Rituals? Anybody? I talked to a man who said that both of his parents died and they wanted to be cremated together and they had a lake house. And they took the urns with the ashes. The whole family gathered, the children, the adult children, remaining elder relatives. It was a very family event. And they brought a bucket that was in the family, a bucket, and they poured both the father and the mother's ashes in the bucket on the beach at the lakeside, and they had the children stir the ashes. They're one. It gave me goosebumps telling that. These are the kinds of creative rituals that we can be creating because who remembered that? The loved ones and the people that have heard the story and tell the story. And when Andrea died, my sister told her oncologist in front of me, we were born 6 months apart and we're going to die 6 months apart. Which I figured took me to October. And I had a whole plan for her death. I was going to decorate her death. I was going to hold her hand. I was going to be there. I was going to calm her children. I had, this whole story built up, a plan. Well, the next morning I called her at 9 o'clock and said, hi, how you doing? Oh, I didn't sleep all night. They have not managed my pain. I said, well, what do you need? I'll come. She said, I need my glasses. I said, I'll be there at 3 o'clock. And an hour later, my niece called and said she'd just gotten a call that my sister had no pulse. Hurry over. And I was the first to arrive. And because I know what I know, I walked into the room and I went crazy. She was laying like this with the spotlight on her, the blankets a mess, garbage, equipment, the lights on everywhere. And I turned around and I closed the door and I was like, what? And a nurse came, because there was a sign on the door, see the nurse first, and I didn't. She came, I said, how can you let anyone, a family member, walk into a room like that? You get her straightened up, make her look like she's asleep, turn those lights out, open the blinds, get us water, and get rid of the garbage. Oh, well, the doctor wants to see you. And I'm like shaking, you know? She scurries in with another nurse, and this doctor comes up to me, tall, thin guy, his name, Dr. Lovinger. Loving her? Yeah. Okay, calm down. Pleasant, calm demeanor. I'm so sorry. She had a DNR, or they would have resuscitated her. And then there's this doctor, female, blonde, just, you know, and she had a name tag, but her first name was in huge letters, and it was Anna, which is our mother's name. And I just let go, and I started to cry and laugh, and said, would one of you hug me? And they both wrapped around me, and they let me cry, and I felt, you know, just like ease me. They said they were sorry. I said, you have to do better at this. I'm going to write something up for you, which I'm going to do before I leave here. But really, and then everybody came and we sat with her, flew there for about 4 hours, just holding her hands. My niece said, oh, I want to keep her hands warm for when my daughter gets here. It was really, and 2 daughters, one of them was stoic, the other one couldn't stop crying. She was just, you know, and my sister's son came, a mess. Well, I had plans, Karen and David had come to Indiana to visit family, and they were coming to my house the very next day, and we were all going to fly back here together. And I, well, yeah, you know, I wasn't, so I can't, I need another day to call people and to get myself together. But you two are the right people to be with me right now. So we had kind of a sweet distraction, and I got to do what I needed to do, and we flew here, and I just kind of locked myself in my house for a week, and just, you know, got myself gathered. And I came home and I took the public transportation, so I had to walk to my corner, and I turned my corner, and my house is the 3rd house over, and I have a parkway garden with milkweed and butterfly bushes and things in it. And last summer, I maybe saw 5 monarch butterflies all summer. In fact, we went to the Botanic Garden and didn't see one all day in the Botanic Garden. I turned the corner, and there is a monarch in my milkweed, laying an egg. Oh my God. And normally, when they see somebody, they fly away. Well, she didn't. And I kind of tiptoed to see how, because I wanted to take a picture, how close I could get. And she flew around me and went back and laid another egg and danced in the flowers and came back. She's like, would not leave me. And then she laid another egg, and normally they'll lay 1 egg and disappear. She flew across the street and came back. And now I'm just feeling so good. I don't want to say it was my sister, but it just was so symbolic. It was so symbolic. And then a month later, I'm at a concert with cancer survivors in the choir. It was a cancer survivor choir. And when it was over, I couldn't get out of my pew. It was in a church. And I turned to the woman next to me who'd been singing the words of 1960s songs, and she was much older than me. I said, oh, I'm glad I'm sitting next to you, because you knew all the words. And she said, well, you were rocking too, which it was. And we're talking. She said, where'd you go to high school? I said, I went in the city. I was in the suburbs. She said, no, tell me. I said, the Immaculata. Little all-girls Catholic school that closed in 1975. She says, so did I. Class of 46. I said, oh my God, my sister was the class of 52. What's your name? And she says, Dolores, which is my sister's name.
Wow.
It's like, you know, they just don't. And sometimes I've had people say they see a cardinal and they just felt like Dad. Yeah. Hummingbirds and butterflies. If we're open to all these things, there is bliss. There is bliss, and we need to take it while we're alive, and we need to find it, because life's really luscious, and death is a part of it. And when we embrace that and make friends with death, life is just so much sweeter. I guarantee you. Thank you.